Hello, humans of the world. You are now tuned into Relayshons Podcast, where me and a new co-host just like you discuss our relations with ourselves, with each other, and our experiences. Are we ready to break the cycles? You know, the ones that live within our learned behaviors. Have you noticed the decisions you make subconsciously? The ones that lead you right back to where you started? Let's take on the healing journey together. Get on this PJ of unconventional conversations and let's travel all the way through our lineage. Then let's break the cycles link by link. Ready? Let's do this. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Relations. I've been waiting so long to say that. Hello, humans of the world. How are you? I miss you. I've been thinking about you guys. I am extremely nervous right now. I feel like, I'm sharing my virginity all over again on the podcast. It's been a long time. So I know that you're wondering, where you been at, girl? Where you been at, what you doing, what you been up to, what's going on, what happened. So this is where I wanted to kind of open up season three, you guys. I've been doing this since 2019, September is when I started this journey on my own. And you guys know I had a previous podcast for all the newcomers called This True that I had with my BFF, my friend, Adrian. We will be doing that again very, very soon. So tune in for that. So I kind of just wanted to open this up and just literally just address the elephant in the room. Why did I disappear for the last 5 months? That last quarter of 2020, it hit and it was time for me to take a break. So today I really want to address where I was and really talk about what depression really is and how, to me, depression is really decompression. So what does that mean? Now, I will get into all of it, but let me start off with all that triggered the hibernation, which is or was a lot of changes happening, a little processing of emotions in the experiences. And when everyone was getting the message of slowing down their lives, I was full speed ahead. Let me just share all of the things. So as you know, I always start off with my definitions. And this season, I really want to reference definitions from this Webster dictionary from 1822. So just some background. In 1806, Noah Webster published his first dictionary. And then in 1807, he was able to begin working on more even comprehensive edition. And in 1828, this is the one that he published. And so I kind of want to reference this one because as I was researching, I always do my definitions so that we're on the same page when it comes to words. I realized wait a second, these early on definitions make a lot more sense than all the revisions that happened since 1828. So I want to start off with the definition of depression because I know that this is a word that's really famously used, but barely anyone understands. So the definition, according to Webster in 1828, a sinking of spirits, dejection, a state of sadness, want of courage or animation, as depression of the mind. Second definition is the act of pressing down or the state of being pressed down, a low state. And I thought that was ironic because I literally in this process of decompression in the last 5 months, I've been feeling that. I've been feeling wait, I know that this is called depression, but I feel this is I'm decompressing something. Something is being released. And so it's so interesting when I saw the definition. I was like, no wonder, duh. And then the second word I want to reference, which was not in the 1828 definition or edition of the dictionary. So I had to kind of take it on the revisions, but decompression is a reduction in air pressure, a gradual reduction of air pressure on a person who has been experiencing high pressure while driving in order to prevent decompression sickness. So I guess I want to just get into it. as we understand definitions, please keep that in mind as I kind of just share everything. So let's just start from the top. What happened, girl? Well, let's start with the top of the year. 2020, I know, was different for everybody, but for me, it started off really well. I brought in the new year in Colombia. Yes, Colombia, the country. And I was over the moon. I celebrated right across from the beach and spent New Year's Day on the beach, getting massages and having nice, cocktails on the beach. It was amazing. And then boom, back to 2020 craziness. I flew back and I remember I was on the plane on my way back. And as we landed, you turn off your phone and you could turn it off of airplane mode. And I got a message from my realtor and he's like, Melissa, they accepted your offer. And I had put in right before I left, I had put in an offer for this house that I really loved. And I was just so excited. And so it was the second offer I had put in. And so I was just like, oh, wow. Okay. I guess, time to figure out this home. And this was January 2020. So, this was early COVID days. So no one is really talking about COVID heavily in the US. And no one was definitely not talking about it in Colombia. And so came back and I was due to fly to California 2 weeks later because I was going to move out of my apartment in Oakland. So for those of you that don't know, I used to live in Oakland, California for 4 years. Amazing time. Shout out to Oakland. I had amazing, beautiful memories in that apartment. I moved into that apartment a week and a half before I got the call that my brother passed away. And I now think back and pay homage to him because I feel like that was the apartment that was given to me to kind of go through my grieving process when he passed away. So I'm so grateful for that apartment. And flying back there was definitely reminiscence of all the times that I had there. I recuperated from my surgery there. So many memories. So I flew back. I was moving out. I had subleased it for 3 years while I wasn't living there. And my tenant had moved out, so I went to completely move out and just turn it in. And then it was time for me to come back and start working on my deadlines for like my closing. So I had finally gotten my closing dates, which was the end of March 30th to be exact, of 2020 was my first official closing date of my home, the offer that I put in here in New York. And so I came back and I started packing and I started prepping for what that looked like. And because I had to kind of move out of my current apartment, I had already turned in that I was leaving. And so I was like in between homes, right? Moving out of one home to two homes now, because the Oakland apartment, then the New York apartment, then moving into this new house, right? And then I had to also, it was up for my LA apartment, which I also left very frantically and left it to a friend of mine. And so I had to figure that out because we were up for a renewal. So I was going to hand it over to him and we had a falling out. And I mean, this is like a friend, I'm not even going to say his name, but it's somebody I speak to like on a daily. He's really one of my close friends and our fallout was really hard for me. So I had to basically turn in the apartment and I, in a way, was evicting my friend, which was super hard. And I think that was also part of the beginning of this full speed ahead process that I was going through. And so, okay. Kind of evict that. So I'm like, okay, let me fly over there. My lease is up in May, so I have some time to kind of figure that out. So then maybe the first week of February, I started feeling sick. And I remember going into work and as I was at work, one of my coworkers looks at me and she says, oh my God, Melissa, your eyes are red. I was like, what do you mean? So I go into the bathroom and I see that my eyes are really red. And I never really had pink eye. I mean, not as an adult from what I remember. So I go and I try to wash my face and I'm like, what's going on? So I'm like feeling weird now. And so anyway, I ended up having a few more meetings and kind of finished off the day and left early that day. The next day I woke up and I had a fever. I started feeling like chest pains and really, really tired. Like I just remember feeling exhausted. Nonetheless, I finished. Of course, I was like, working from home. Then, as the days proceeded, I got sicker and sicker. By day 3, I couldn't take it anymore. I remember waking up in the middle of the night with like cold sweats. I remember coughing up a lung, and like when I would lay on my back, I would feel like my lungs were collapsing. And I never been this sick before, ever. And so I decided to take myself to urgent care. I get to urgent care. Remember, it was a Wednesday. This was like day 3 of really feeling sick. And I'm talking to the nurse, and I had kind of told her, I read about this whole COVID thing, like, corona, is that what I have? Like, can you test me? She's like, well, I'm going to test you for pneumonia. I'm going to test you for the flu. She's like, it's probably the flu. You'll be fine. I'm like, okay. She leaves the room and comes back in like a hazmat suit. And I'm just like, whoa. She was like, oh, I have kids at home. So, just don't be afraid. This is the reason why I'm wearing this. And I'm just like, don't be afraid. I'm afraid. Am I contagious? Anyway, she tested me for pneumonia, the flu, and I think it was like bronchitis. I think it was the third thing. And this was early stages of corona. So they didn't have testing for this. And so she comes back and she's like, well, you tested negative for everything. And I'm just like, what do you mean? And she's like, yeah, I think you need to just go home and rest. And I'm just like, okay, but I feel like I'm dying. So what do you mean I tested negative for everything? Can you give me something else? Like, can you test me for something else? Like I must have something. And she's like, no, there's really nothing that I can do for you. I can't even prescribe you anything because you're not positive for anything. So you have to just go home and rest. She's like, you shouldn't go into work. Just don't be around anyone. Stay to yourself and sleep. I'm just like, okay. And I remember the video that I took. I took a video on my way from the urgent care about how horrible I was feeling in my experience. I'm going to post that at some point so that you can see, because I would love to see what I said too. And so I went home and I proceeded to sweat and ill myself. But one thing that I learned from that experience was how miraculous the physical body is. The human body literally can cure itself. It doesn't need you to give it medicine. It doesn't need you to do anything but hydrate yourself. I had a lot of tea. I had lemon. I hardly had any food because I couldn't really taste anything. And so I just slept. I slept and I took some vitamins and I sweat. And that's all I did, and showered. And I took like really like hot and cold showers. And so finally, I started feeling a little bit better, maybe like a week or 2 weeks later. It took me a long time. I mean, I feel like I was sick for a whole month. I didn't start feeling better until March, when everything kind of started to go away. So when the lockdown happened, I was already home because I had gone from like being sick for so long that I was already kind of in a way quarantined. My apartment was full of boxes. And I'm sitting in my apartment. I'm just like, wow, I'm grateful. Like, this is a dream come true. And I know that, in retrospect, right, I understand that the world was in turmoil. There were a lot of people dying, and I was hearing like ambulances passing by all night long. Like, it's not like I wasn't aware that this was a really tragic period, but for just my daily life, I wasn't really impacted, right? I was still working remotely, which I'm grateful for, because the fact that I can. And I was, finally being at home by myself, which I loved. And I was able to just finally have like a work-life balance, is what I felt, right? I felt like a sense of freedom. So I wasn't mad about lockdown at all, but I still had to move. So I still had to run to meetings in regards to my house. I was meeting with my realtor. I was meeting with my mortgage broker company. I was making calls. I had to make copies. So I would go to like the copy machine place. When things were shut down, like I found this accountant that was like still working down the street from my house. And he's like, oh yeah, I could charge you and you can use my copy machine and my scanner and all of that. So thankfully for him, I was able to get stuff done. So I was still packing an apartment. I was still buying a house. I was still working my 9 to 5. So nothing had slowed down. So then as life went on, May came around and I had to turn in my apartment in LA. So I flew to Los Angeles. It was mid-May of 2020. And I remember the day that I landed, on my drive from the airport to my Airbnb, I get there and I see helicopters everywhere. And what happened? I looked and it was the first protest that was going on due to all the systemic racism and police shootings. And I was just like, okay, out of all times that I can land here, this is the day I'm going to land here. I thought it was epic. I mean, as you guys know, LA is like known for protesting. Just California, period, is a very activist state. There's a lot of people that like to speak up and take action. And so I thought it was very beautiful that I was able to be there during that time. So I attended my first protest, and I was able to experience the first, what is that called? Like the police lineup, when you like are across from the police and they have a lineup and then we're moving more closer to them and they're coming closer to us. And a little hectic, but nonetheless, it was an experience that I was happy to have because that was my way of really feeling close to making a difference, to really staring at injustifications directly in the face. So that was vital. Then I had to move out of this apartment. So I was like going to get boxes from Home Depot and I had a couple things to pack. And one morning on my way to pick up my breakfast, I am driving and I get into a car accident. And I've been in maybe 2 other car accidents before, but this time was a bit different because this is the first car accident that because the way it happened, I was turning into a street and the person that hit me was coming out of that street and he didn't see me. So as I was turning, he was coming in towards me. I literally looked at his face, like we locked eyes as he was like barging into me. And I just remember it being really like drastic for me. I was in the car by myself. Thankfully, my friend wasn't in the car with me. And so, of course, I pull over and like my car is dented on the side. He hit my side of the car. And I pull over and, of course, he was a nice guy. He apologized. He took accountability right away. We handled, calling insurances, changing all the information, all that jazz. And I had to head back. So I had a whole day planned of things to do that day that had to get canceled because I got into this car accident. But nonetheless, in Melissa fashion, I figured it out. I called in, I put in the the details to get a new car and to get the current car picked up and all of that. Still went to the house, packed up a few boxes, had a conversation with my friend who I had the falling out with, and we hadn't spoken in months. And so managed to do it. That day we handled it, and then I handled everything in a couple days and flew back to New York to finish moving out of my New York apartment. Now, this is the second apartment I'm moving out of. I'm currently in the third apartment that I'm moving out of. And because of the pandemic, my closing date kept moving back. So remember I said originally my date to close on my house was on March 30th. Every week they would change the date to another time. Then it was some issues with the house. That it was like thing after thing, right? And my landlord's getting upset with me. He's like calling me every day, telling me I need to leave because there was a new person that was supposed to move into my current apartment. So after like a month, I was like, you know what? I'm going to just move out. I'm going to just move everything into storage and I'm going to just move into my childhood home with my sister. So I did that, moved everything out, put it into storage, moved into my sister's, and I was staying at my sister's in my mom's room, in my mom's bed, for the first time in a long since she had passed away. So my mom had passed away in 2018, as many of you may know. And so I had to now sleep in her bed and live in her room I was there for about a month or two. Also, we're still working remotely, so my 9 to 5 still hadn't stopped. There were a lot of layoffs in my job, though, and so my workload definitely had increased. Nonetheless, we had to keep moving. So finally, got a new closing date on my home. Had to move into now my house. This is my fourth move in a matter of 3 months. So finally moved everything in. And everything is going great. I'm doing my podcast. Podcast is going great. I was doing IG lives. I was super active. My 9 to 5 was still, super busy, but nonetheless, I was managing both. Now I had a home, and it's a multifamily unit home. So now I'm not only a new homeowner, but I'm also a landlord. And so during the pandemic, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to not rent it out, leave the unit empty, because, there was a lot happening with people losing their jobs. And, in New York City and in a lot of cities, tenants' rights are a lot more valuable than the right of the landlord. So the last thing I wanted was to move someone in, then they lose their job. And now I have to basically live with, people in my unit without getting any payment for it. So I basically left it empty, but nonetheless was still doing repairs here and there. Several random things happened, obviously, because it's a house. So this is what houses do. They cost challenges if always something going wrong. And then I remember it's August. So August, then my mom's birthday was approaching in September, and like feelings and emotions towards that was happening. I was having like random conflicts with friends, a few friends and family members, and it was just boiling over. So now that I know I'm kind of like dealing with all of that, and I'm figuring out like all these unresolved emotions. I'm starting to feel tired. I'm starting to move. I think the 8 months of the year was just now finally like seeping in. And I just started feeling really tired all the time. I was starting to feel like all over the place. And I just felt like in moments I was like spiraling, and I wasn't accepting the signs, right? There were signs that were telling me to take a break, to take a moment, and I wasn't stopping. And for a long time, I didn't think I could, right? There were things that I needed to do. I had responsibilities I needed to take care of, and I didn't want anything to stop, right? I just kept the wheels running. And I'm sure a lot of people could relate to that, right? Like the keeping going, the not stopping, all of that leads to us burning out. And so as I was going through all of that, I started not having all these other things, right? Like the denials of just fighting against stopping, which is like not having grace for myself, telling myself that I was being lazy for wanting to stop, telling myself to snap out of it, feeling guilty for feeling overwhelmed. As you're getting things done and you're productive, you're just like, okay, girl, what are you going to complain about the fact that you have stuff to do in a house when you have a house? Are you going to complain about stuff that you have to do with your job because you have a job? So it's like, stop complaining, right? Beating myself up for feeling the way I was feeling. And, all these things that we were taught to believe, right, is not to respect balance and rest and self-care and stopping, right? The mindset that was taught to us that we need to unlearn is these things that we live by, right? Well, pressure builds diamonds, as if we were relating to an oyster, as if we were oysters, or keep going, don't stop. You rest when you die. Consistency is key. Breaks are for fools and for the lazy and for the weak. You are strong. So keep being strong, right? And I would say like one of the most, I know that statement is said to be a compliment. You are strong. And I can't tell you how many times I hear that from peers. But the reality of it is it almost sets unrealistic expectations that I'm not allowed to feel emotions, that I'm not allowed to be human because I am strong. And so these are toxic mindsets and things that we say to encourage each other and support each other, but really they're not supportive. They're setting unrealistic expectations of the idea that rest and breaks and stopping is valuable for our mental health, for our spirit, for our minds. Like everything is just how we regenerate, how we rejuvenate, how we keep moving. And so what are the signs that you need a decompression, right? So I had a million red flags popping up and I wasn't listening. So I want to kind of first start with the fact that exhaustion, no matter how much rest you get, is the first sign that you need some decompression. So if you're waking up tired, going to sleep tired, operating on tired, you need to take a break. A mental breakdown. So a mental breakdown is like, for me, is like a level of like confusion and scattered thoughts. Like if everything is a question, like if you need to make a decision and you're just confused about what decision to make, but then now this is not just happening for like big things, but for little things, you're having a mental breakdown. You need to slow down. Another one is a panic attack. So I don't know if anyone has experienced a panic attack. A panic attack is like when you feel like kind of like you're unable to breathe, and you start to feel like you're about to pass out, but you really don't. But it feels very real. Like physically, this is how you feel. It can not be the fact that you're having a heart attack or anything. It could just really be a panic attack. And one thing that I do to deal with that is to touch like a cold floor, or even crouch down on the floor. So I remember the day that I hit the wall and my body said stop. I was having a panic attack, and I went into the shower and I just crushed down on the shower with the water kind of hitting me, and that kind of helped me regulate my breathing again. So that's one. Overwhelm over everything. So if everything that all feels like it's too much, even making a decision of like getting up and like making yourself breakfast, or going to the grocery store, like normal things start to feel overwhelming, you're burning out. It's time to slow down. And then hitting the wall, like, and when you're in complete shutdown, which is the point that you should not get to, right? But when you hit the wall and it's complete shutdown and you no longer are able to operate based on your usual self, it's a clear indication that you need decompression. And so uncovering parts of you that have been dormant and ready to be felt, it's really important. And it started with half of the year for me in 2020. And then it went deeper to the inner child in me that just needed to be nurtured, assured, and taught in a way of doing something. Challenges and new, right? I moved into a new area, new city, and I'm a homeowner for the first time. And so whenever you're starting something new, it's just, it sometimes could be overwhelming because you're trying to figure it out. So if you're finding that life and your body and your mind is letting you know that you need a moment for decompression, don't let life make the decision for you. Just try to slow down and take the time to do so. I also wanted to touch on 3 misconceptions about depression and decompression. And these, just for people to really understand, not just for yourself, but if you're dealing with other people who are going through this, one of the biggest things that I've realized is you don't need a good, clear reason to validate how you're feeling, right? I know that the first thing that I was really beating myself about was like, why are you feeling this way when everything is good, Melissa? Like you have a job, you have a home, you're healthy, like you have nothing to complain about. But the reality of it is sometimes your environment has nothing to do with what's happening inside of you, right? And when you're overwhelmed, when there's a lot going on outside of you, sometimes it gets so deep within you, and sometimes it's buried emotions that you haven't really dealt with, like me. I had 8 months of emotions that I wasn't dealing with, and I have years of emotions that I haven't dealt with that, of course, are going to resurface when you're under pressure. And so that's the first misconception that we really need to accept. The second is depression is different for everyone. So I know that, for some people like me, right, I go into hibernation, I go into seclusion, I disconnect. And that's the way I would know that I am going through something. But for some people, depression is highly active, is someone who is posting and being really happy on social media all the time. Let's not think that depression or decompression is only someone being sad, but that highly active person can also be depressed. So sometimes it's just really paying attention to others and yourself. And the third thing is it's not something you can shake off or snap out of. And I'm really want to express how important it is that when someone is going through something and they're expressing that to you, or they're not expressing it because they really don't know how to, the last thing you should say to them is that they need to shake it off, or they need to snap out of it, or they need to just take a nap and get over it. I know that it's like in our culture, we were taught to just let it go, shake it off, you'll be fine, just get over it. That's not really dealing with it, right? In the process of healing, ignoring and disconnecting from reality is not what we want to continue to do, and to teach ourselves that it's the right thing to do, or that is the healthy thing to do. So that's how I got to the space that I am in. I'm going to be doing a part 2 to walk you through the actual 5 months of my healing journey. There's no way to get around these types of things but to get through them. And that is the most painful part of the process, is really getting through. So I want to spend some time really decomposing that. As a closure, I want to end the season, every episode, with the question, what have you unlearned this season? And for me, when it comes to this process of depression and decompression, I've unlearned the idea that success doesn't include rest. And really being aware of this toxic mindsets that we just have to keep going and not stop. We could be successful and be restful. We could be successful and productive and take care of ourselves. It's about balance. It's about being honest with what we're feeling, and it doesn't make us weak or, lazy or whatever else other associations of this toxic mindsets we've labeled. It's just not realistic to be robots. So thank you so much for listening. I got through that. It wasn't that bad. I feel like I'm back. Am I still rusty? I think I'm smooth right back in, like we surf them waves. You just put on them shoes like we never took them off, right? So I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Until next time, later. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to subscribe and follow on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube at Relayshons Podcast via The Diary of MR. M as in Melissa, R as in Rosario. And now, the best part, here are the after credits, a message from my co-host. So, since there is no co-host, I definitely want to leave you guys with this one statement. The thing about life, God, Allah, Buddha, the universe, whoever you want to call it, is if you don't listen to the signs your body, your mind, and your spirit and your instincts are telling you, baby, life will intervene and make the decisions for you. So don't let life make the decision, and really allow yourself to be human. Allow yourself to be free. Allow yourself to be.